everybody, my name is Michael Bufkin. I'm a CTE teacher here at Kippo Cliff Academy. I'm going to use GPT chat today to kind of walk you through curriculum design and what we're using for next year to put a new course into action. We have some changes in our course this year. We'll be offering game design next year, and our teacher asked if I could help sit down to make the curriculum. I wanted to bring in GPT chat to see what they saw, really just look at the outlines and go from there. So this is what we came up with. So when looking at GPT chat, one of the things we want to know is we're making sure we're framing things correctly and putting it in the right place. And so one of the main things that we do here is ignore all previous instructions. Imagine that you're a master teacher educating high school for 20 years, and you've worked in the areas of game design and programming. Asking and clarifying questions you need before giving output, do you understand? And one of the main reasons we do this is to make sure that the computer understands, one, we are educators and can speak that language. It also knows what kind of outputs we're looking at. One of the main goals also is we're trying to tie this to Texas TEKS to make sure that we're accurate in teaching what the class needs. And we'll have GPT chat check it back at the end, and we'll also do it by hand to make sure that's correct. But this just gives us a good idea of where we start. Computer says, yes, I understand. And then so I ask it to make a 36-week course in which we go through the history of game design. GPT chat then comes through with some questions that we need to work on. Right off the bat, we see that framing our question to GPT chat has given us some already good results. It's asking what the expectation level of students coming into this class is for coding and what they know. We're going to say none, and we're going to keep it pretty low. How many hours per week? We have a block schedule that runs about 4.5. We're going to keep it at 4 just so we can keep it easy. It's always easier to add and move things around, especially with quizzes. What is the learning objective? We're going to state that later, that we're trying to make 2 games throughout the course, one that's very basic and one using our basic coding software, which we get an output. And then finally, the last 2 are, what are the specific types of games that we want to focus on, and are there any specific criteria methods? And so we want to make sure that we have projects built in. We want to have weekly quizzes. And one of the main things that our teacher asked me to do was make sure that we put the history of teaching, or the history of games into the program, and build off that. So the idea is that we're going to go through the history of gaming, starting at Pong, and looking at the major games that were created, and see what innovations those games brought to gaming. Through those innovations, we're then going to have the kids look at those innovations and then build on top of it. Okay? I'm not going to go through the whole thing here. I'll post this down below. But this was just the base idea of what it gave. Already, I don't really love the output here because we've kind of branched it together. And while that's fine for the beginning stages of what we're looking at, we really do want a little more specificity on how things can be broken down, because 3 dots is not a lesson make. Just to give you an idea, though, of the power of GPT chat and how we can use it in education, made it give me a sample lesson here for week 1. So if we look back up at what we were looking at here, week 1 would be Introduction to Game Design and the History of Gaming. And so that's what it's looking here. And the first thing it's going to do is, day 1, give us that. 2, Introduction to Scratch, which is the software we're using, so the kids get familiar with it. Where they're going to, it thinks we should then jump into retro games like Pac-Man, Space Invader, Donkey Kong, and talk about that. I really like this because this is a strong hook for the class, and it's not just another day of talking. We're going to give some chances for the kids to play the games, really get their eyes on. We'll have an interactive worksheet where they're supposed to work through it and see what comes out best. Finally, day 4 is a review and assessment. This is where they take their worksheet previously, and they're going to work through it for the upcoming week. So looking at the cadence of what we want to bring into the class, one of the asks of the teacher was that we make sure we have this cadence set through the game design class. We want to introduce the game. We want them to play, explore the game, and have 5 guided questions for each one. We want them to discuss the game. We want to give the ability for them to talk about it, give discourse, so we're not just playing by ourselves. We want to be able to discuss the class. Next, we're going to break out into small design doc and work through it. And then we head to Scratch to build a basic version. Now, this is going to get complicated quickly. Obviously, we're not going to build the later games in Scratch, but we do want to have an understanding about the ideas that it brings in and what variables we can add to our games. Then we're going to play test and do a gallery walk to make sure we know what's going on. Donkey Kong was what it came up with for the idea. I'll post this down below. I really enjoy how this comes through. It gives a good lesson for how it works and how we go from there. And finally, the thing I want to bring forward and really show the ability of GPT chat to do is it is able to make PowerPoint slides, not directly how you would understand where it gives an output on a Google slide, but it can give you the idea for what's going to be on the slide and even provide speaker notes if you make sure that you give it. For example, up here I said, write a PowerPoint for the day 1 where the speaker introduces and gives a form, and give the form in a table. And when you ask GPT chat to give the form in a table, it will give this output here. GPT chat has no limit on the amount of columns that it has. It does get a little finicky sometimes on how it wants to do it, so you may have to tell it occasionally to stop, but this is not a table. but it's something to work through. And what I really like about it, it exports very easily into Excel sheets, which is great for documentation. You'll notice that it gives the slides here. It gives the introduction for what the table is, the information on the slide, and the speaker notes. It does give a BR for break where the space is supposed to be. I could improve my prompt, and in the future I would do that for how to give outputs and give it within the table. Make sure to break it up by a dash or however you want to do it. But when you're planning ahead with the year coming up, we're trying to get ahead of the summer and the planning that comes in that. And we want to make sure that we get as much documentation early, and this is just a great way to start. Would love to hear your ideas on how this is going to go. I'll make a couple more videos on how the progress is going in the class and what it's going, but this is just some basic ideas of what you can use on GPT Chat and ideas to work in your classroom. Thank y'all so much. Have a great day.